What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and today we're going to look at warm-ups and why a warm-up is important, what problems I often see with people who complete their own warm-ups, as well as a couple of ideas of how you can structure your own warm-up depending on the sport that you're in. So I guess to jump straight into it, why are warm-ups important, or why do we look to build them in as a routine to start to the game, or start a training session, or even go for a run? Well, first off, they have been shown to reduce injuries. They are also, I guess, a good way of introducing people into the sport. So you kind of have a bit of a phase that you can get your head right, get your body right, and kind of get into the zone. Now, I think a lot of people sometimes probably spend too long warming up, or they have too much of a warm-up routine that can take away from the sport a small bit. And I've seen it with teams that they have the manager or a coach has probably taken too long to go through the warm-up, and instead of just bringing them up to the level that they need to be at, it has ended up fatiguing a lot of the players that are playing. So I think there's kind of a fine line between doing too much and then doing the right amount, as well as doing too little. And I think we see with a lot of players as well that they actually end up doing not half enough because they either arrive late or they are just not thinking that they need to get enough of it in, or a lot of the time people prioritize the wrong things in the warm-up. So that causes you to, I guess, waste time that you could be using to bring the body and mind up to the level that it needs to be. So looking at, are they important? They definitely can help to reduce injury. As I said, sometimes people do too much work in them, but they can help introduce you into the game and kind of bring your mind and body up to speed. But the other side of things is that it's not going to actually prevent every injury. And if you're coming into a match or a training session with an injury in the background, just completing a good warm-up doesn't mean that you're not likely to re-injure that area. So there's other factors at play as well there. And I think a lot of us miss out on those because I think some people put too much emphasis on their activation side of things and making themselves feel better before they get into it. But once they actually get out of that training session or out of that game, they don't look back at what was contributing to that injury in the first place and why it keeps happening and why it keeps reoccurring. And I've got caught for this myself in that I play in 7-a-side soccer out here in Bally, and I've been struggling with a calf injury because there was games on a Tuesday and games on a Friday, and all I was doing is I was showing up, I was going through the warm-up, then I would get it to a point that it'd feel okay, but once I'd start sprinting again, I'd feel it go again. And it was really frustrating, and it's been going on now for a good few weeks. So it's something that I just had to step back completely to take care of. And I was putting it down to just thinking that if I did a proper warm-up that I'd be able to get through a whole game, but I was only able to last about 15 minutes every time, and then it would start to kick up again. So what problems do I see often with warm-ups with teams, with people who are doing warm-ups for their own sport? Let's say if you're running a marathon, or if you're running 10Ks, 5Ks, sprints, I think a lot of people make the same mistakes no matter what sport it is that they either do too little warm-up, and you'll see this with runners especially, that they'll just get out and they'll go straight away and they won't do any warm-up or do any exercises before it. And you'll see it in GAA that they'll go out on the pitch and straight away they'll start kicking scores. So I see this so often. It has to be one of the most common ways people get injured before a game. It's just going straight out and kicking scores. And kicking some crazy ones as well, just to kind of get in the mood. They start booting from the 30, 45 without any warm-up done at all, and expecting that their body's going to handle it. Now, it will in a lot of circumstances or a lot of situations, you'll get away with it. But if you have an injury that's been lingering, or if you have something that's in the background that hasn't been taken care of fully, that's when you'll notice it start to kick up a small bit more. And you often see people get muscle tears around this time as well. So if any team I'm with, or have been with in the past, if I notice I'm doing this, I'll usually highlight it. I'll go up to the players and I'll just mention it to them that it might be better to bring in a couple of runs before you start doing that, or even shorter kicks, because coming straight out of the dressing room, and let's say you've done a bit of activation work in the dressing room and going out on the pitch and kicking straight away, you're at a huge risk of injury. To look at the warm-up then, and to break it down a small bit more, I think a lot of teams, there's not enough variety in it. So when you're looking at structuring a specific warm-up for yourself or for a team, there needs to be different levels of contact. There needs to be different levels of chaos. And I think you need to start with just have a nice controlled movements, but then as soon as possible, you're looking to introduce more sport-specific skills, looking at doing a small bit faster pace, higher velocity movements, as well as introducing contact if it's a contact sport. I think this is one of the biggest ones that a lot of teams miss out on, is that they don't introduce any contact or any type of contact exercise or small-sided game in their warm-up. What they'll do is they'll do the normal one that you go in and out, hand passing, then you go kicking, or you might go pucking, and then you go hitting scores or hand pass off and hit a score. But there's a lot of teams, if you're doing that, you're missing out on a huge part of the game. Now I'm talking about GAA here specifically just for a second, because in the game there's going to be so much contact, and if you don't get that early on, you're going to be avoiding it, and subconsciously a lot of the time you're not going to be as willing to go in and put a tackle on someone or hit someone because you haven't done it before or earlier on in that day. So I think there should be a good amount of contact in the warm-up and as early as possible. Now it can start small with whatever 10 or 20%, but it should be building up to 100% then as soon as possible in that warm-up. I think they should take in and around about 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes is a great time frame to get those in, and then after that you can start introducing you can do it in it, but your small-sided games, a bit more sport-specific stuff as well, because if you do that, then you're giving yourself the best chance to enter the game and in the first 10 minutes really take over because you're ready to go. And this looks at, I suppose when you're looking at it this way, you have to look at the different speeds. So at the start, it can be something basic. I like the idea of, you'll see a lot of inter-county teams doing it, a lot of club teams do it, where you're hand passing in a circle, you're throwing the ball up, you're doing catches, but you're avoiding players. I love that idea. I think it's great because there's a lot more things you have to avoid. When you're there, you need to think about the other people that are around you, you need to think about the ground, you need to think about what you're going to do after you get the ball, and I think it's very useful. For when you're looking at like running, you need to look at building up your speed, but you also need to look at having maybe something that's a bit more chaotic. So I would look at something like eyes closed, some movements with your eyes closed, and I'm not saying to go running with your eyes closed, but in general doing different jumps and hops and landing, maybe it could be doing like a triple hop. You could be doing lateral hops and then closing your eyes as well. That's one simple way of adding more chaos to a run, because you just want your whole body warmed up. You want your balance and proprioceptive systems warmed up as well as just having the muscles. And I think introducing simple things like that can really, really help. And then obviously building it up so you're doing more, let's say 50%, 60%, 70% runs. And it doesn't have to be over 100 meters. It can be over 10 or 20 meters once you're able to handle it. But introducing those is a great way of getting the heart rate up while you are, or before you go out. Okay, and especially for runners, that's a really, really simple one. Now, you could also introduce some plyometric exercises, and this works for both, where you're looking at jumps, as I was saying, or you could be looking at explosive med ball slams or throws. Things like that will help a good bit more. But you need to find out what's a good length warm-up for you, so you don't end up doing too much and actually fatiguing yourself. So when you get out there, you're gassed. And you see this a lot. And this is going to be completely dependent on your fitness level. There's no point saying a 15-minute warm-up is perfect for everybody if your fitness is really poor. So you have to take that into account. And if your fitness is really good, you might even be looking at doing a small bit longer warm-up. I know a lot of teams and a lot of players like to be sweating before they get out. I think that's a good marker to be at. You need to be at least sweating a small bit. If you're going onto the pitch and you're cold, then it's going to take you a couple of minutes to get into it. And when we look at field sports, I think this idea of going in at half time and coming straight back out again and into the pitch is going to really affect your performance. And there's research showing that as well, that if you re-warm up again after half time, you have a better performance in the first 15 minutes of the second half. And a lot of teams miss out on that. It's because they go in, they relax, they focus on the tactical side of things, the strategy, but then they forget that when they come back out, they have to bring their heart rate up. So I think that if you are coming back out, look to do a couple of sprints. Look to set the team up, do a couple of sprints, maybe come out 5 minutes earlier than you would normally, so you don't just have to jog back out on the pitch. do a few sprints, small bit of hand passing or a bit of light kicking, and then get back into it. And as I said, you'll see an improvement in your performance in the first 10 to 15 minutes of the second half. Because if you think about it, it's the same as going into the first half without doing a warm-up. It's going to take you a bit of time to get up to speed. So if you can get up to speed straight away with maybe 3 to 5 sprints, and then a small bit of kicking and a small bit of contact, then overall over a season, that's going to make a huge difference on your performance. Okay, so they're kind of the main ones. Now, I think the last problem I see is that if you know there's certain exercises that work for you, or you've had a couple of injuries in the past and you need to take care of them, you need to take your warm-up into your own hands. So if you know the team is going to go out and go through a few exercises, I like to give people time as well if I'm calling a warm-up, so that they can go through their own bits and pieces, and maybe give them 3 to 4 minutes just to go through their own exercises before they get into the next thing. But if your team or your manager, they don't give you that bit of time, and it's completely dependent on what they want to do, you can't blame them for that. But some people like to go from one step into the next and build it up. If that's the team that you're with, then it's important to do your own stuff right before you go out. Okay, and a lot of people like doing stuff in the dressing room. They like to do foam rolling. Some people like to do band activation. I'll talk about those in a couple of seconds. But once you know that you're taking it into your own hands and you're not just leaving it on the team to take care of it, then I think you're in a good position to reduce risk of injury or re-injury again. But it'll also set you up for yourself. Okay. So how do you structure your warm-up is the next thing. Now, I talked about a lot of this already, so I won't dwell on it for too long. I'll go into the specifics a small bit more. But when you were looking at structuring a warm-up, I think you need to set out 10 to 15 minutes to dedicate that to your warm-up, as I said. Now, if you have time and you like to get to the pitch early and you want to tog out and get yourself ready, or if you're getting down to the track and you want to get yourself ready, I think there's a few things that everyone can add into it. And as I said, light jogging, building that up is a great way. Then adding more sport-specific skills is another excellent one. Then you start adding a bit more chaos. So like as I was saying, eyes closed, jumping, avoiding players, contact, taking a ball and taking a sidestep. It could be that you're sprinting out and decelerating, different things like that, balance and proprioceptive exercises. I would always try to fit in maybe two different times that you do mobility movements. So that could be in the dressing room, or when you're getting changed, you go through maybe a 3 to 4 minute mobility routine that you don't have to do a load of exercises. Few exercises are good. Maybe I always give my clients probably 3 exercises, that the ones that work for them, and I'd say if you have time, do other ones, but 3 exercises that they always complete every time before a game or before a training session. And that works both ways. It's as a warm-up, but it also sets a trigger so that your body starts to know when it's time to get into that game. Okay, so mobility movements are an excellent way of kind of focusing the mind, but also getting the body moving a small bit more, and that'd be more controlled environment. Now, I would do them before you go out, and I would do them after the warm-up again, so that you have basically spent, it's going to take you about 5 minutes altogether to get them done, but it could be that you're doing, let's say, 3 exercises at the start, and then you repeat one of those exercises then at the end again. That's a nice way of doing it. I rarely give people activation with bands or anything like that, because I think you can use that time better in a lot of situations. So I don't really give anyone like crab walks or anything like that, because the muscles that you use for a crab walk, and when you're putting a band on, it's very isolated. And sometimes I think that you may be increasing risk of injury from very specific fatigue, when instead you could get the same thing out of doing a lateral hop, and that's more specific and more like what you're going to be doing on the pitch. Okay, as well as it's more explosive, so your nervous system gets primed as a result, and you get that post-activation potentiation or PAP stimulus. And that's something that I'll talk about a small bit more in just a couple of minutes. So I don't usually introduce any type of activation exercise, and I never really recommend people do foam rolling, because I just think that you could spend your time doing better things. You're not going to get a whole lot out of it, and it's not going to have a huge impact on your performance. So yeah, I don't really look at those at all. I never introduce them. But if you do it and you like it and it gets your head in the zone, you know it, or you feel that it helps your own performance, then I wouldn't write it off either. I just keep it in there So I know I do have clients, even ones that I've worked with for 3 or 4 years now, and they still go through those routines because they just like that. It gets their body primed. It's something that they have always done it, and in a way it kind of sets a trigger for them. And I think that's a huge one for yourself. That's why it comes down to it's individual and it's very specific. What works for you as well as what works for other people. You don't need to start trying new things just because you see one guy using a band exercise, then you start using it. I would say look at exercises that are body weight and explosive, and I think that you get more out of those than you do out of the activation exercises. But that's my opinion. And I think outside of that, if you're introducing your plyos and you're introducing your balance and proprioceptive exercises, you can do those before. So you can do those like before you even get out on the pitch. So I'd always look at like a lateral hop, a triple hop, a double leg hop, or a counter movement jump is good. Maybe landing on a single leg with your eyes closed. And these are for running and for GAA. They're the same. They work just as well. And then you start to move out on the pitch and go through your normal warm-up. Now, if it's myself that's doing it, a lot of the times I will actually go through a small 15-minute mobility routine around about 2 hours before the game. I think it helps me get into the zone, especially if I know I have a long drive to the game. It really helps me just get moving a small bit more, and it improves body awareness, I feel, before the game, which is a handy one. That is when you get out there, you kind of know what you need to focus on a small bit more. So I would say to do that maybe 2 hours before if it works for you. I also look at introducing something like a bit more like of a coordinative exercise where you're juggling, or you have someone throwing small ball and you're catching them, different things like that. Just I like it for myself. I feel it gets me sharp. And then you can introduce PAP then. So PAP is this post-activation potentiation. It's based in science, but it's based off of priming your nervous system so that you get a bit more explosive during your games, during your sessions. And you'll see it with sports teams that they do it up to 24 hours before in some situations where they'll do explosive exercises at the gym. And it'll only be like 3 reps of, it could be a hex bar jump, it could be a ball slam, and it could be a broad jump. And that's exactly what I get my clients to do in a lot of situations. I get them to do a hex bar jump on the spot, or maybe some type of vertical jump. Then I'll get them to do a heavy ball slam or heavy lateral slam. It could be a ball throw, like a medicine ball throw. It could be an explosive push-up. It really depends on your sport. For running, I like jumping lunges. I think they're very good. And I mix them with like a hip flexion switch. But doing things like that an hour, 2 hours before the game is really going to help set your body up so that you're a lot more explosive when you get there, and you'll feel it in a lot of situations. You're only doing 3 reps, but because they're as explosive as possible, you'll feel it afterwards. And this idea came from originally if you look at people like doing a heavy squat and then going into a vertical jump after, or a box jump after. If you do a heavy squat and then go into a box jump, your box jump is going to be a lot higher right within, let's say, an hour after the heavy squat than it will be if you just went for a box jump by itself with no heavy lift in it. Okay, so that's where the idea comes from, and it works very well with a lot of sports, so I definitely try it out. A lot of the time you're going to get it from doing sprints before anyway, but this is just stepping it up on another level. So after all of that, I think looking at the basics of it, what you need to do is, as I said, you start out with like light activity, but then start to increase the complexity as soon as possible. And the complexity is sport-specific skills. In running, it could be accelerating, decelerating. It could be doing jumps with your eyes closed, stuff like that. Or it could be that you just get a couple of laps around the track. With GAA, you're looking at dual tasking, where you're catching a ball, landing, cutting off to the side, and then doing that for where you're catching the ball, landing, and there's a guy coming in to tackle you. That's just another level of it. It could be that you tackle a guy, take it off him, or a girl, take it off him, do a hand pass, and then go for a score, something like that as well. Okay, those ideas, like that idea of increasing complexity, is it should be a huge component of your warm up. If it's not, you're going to miss out on those for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the match, and you're going to be less likely to engage in certain positions and in certain parts of the match or portions of the game, because you just subconsciously it's not in your head. So that's why I I think people should be getting a lot of contact. I think even doing stuff where you're kind of wrestling and you're messing around, stuff like that, it's good. It's good for camaraderie. It's good for getting boys and girls warmed up. And it's also good for getting you that bit stronger, as well as getting you used to contact early on. And I think the more people introduce those, or the more teams that start to introduce those, will notice straight away that their team is up for the game, is ready to perform. And that doesn't matter if you're playing football, if you're playing soccer, if you're playing hurling or rugby. I know in rugby you have to do it anyway because of the tackling. People always or usually introduce that early on in the warm-up. But I think it's missed out a lot in GAA. A lot of contact is missed out early in the warm-up, and it should be introduced a small bit more. So you're looking at mobility movements, maybe plyos as well. Plyos are just different jumps, balance and proprioceptive exercises. You'll see that a lot with single leg RDL jumps. It could be that you're running and cutting at a cone. And then obviously you're looking to introduce kicking, passing, and scores, shooting at the goal, shooting for points as well at the same time. So they're the basic ones. Is activation necessary? I don't think it is. What I mean is like those activation bands, I don't think they're necessary. I think you can use that time to do jumps and hops and stuff that are more simulate the game a small bit more. I also think that you should look at introducing cuts, spins, jumps, and like landing, deceleration in your warm-up as well. And I think they are missed out a lot, even though they're moves or movements that are used in the game so often. Okay, then you can look at introducing PAP, and the PAP is for any sport at all, especially any explosive sport, because it just helps to prime the nervous system, get you that bit more explosive, and get you ready to go. And you'll notice then when you start doing your sprints and you start doing cuts, or when you start actually getting onto the pitch or onto the track, that you'll be that bit more explosive. So the more we do that, the better. But that's everything, guys, that I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to just look at warm-ups. I wanted to talk a small bit through what I would introduce and what I feel is not really that necessary. And I also wanted to talk about some of the problems I see with people's warm-ups, because I think one takeaway from this, if you are playing GA, is that you need to re-warm up again after the second half. That just take literally 3 to 5 minutes to do a couple of sprints, do a couple of runs, maybe do a small bit of passing. You'll get more out of it than sitting there talking for an extra 2 or 3 minutes, because usually everything that's been said is just being repeated at that stage. And it's better to get yourself warmed up and sharp and ready to go as soon as you can afterwards. But that's all from me today, guys. I would really, really appreciate then if you could send this on to a friend or someone who's another teammate, as well as anyone who you think would be interested in it. Or if you could, I would love if you could share it on your story. It goes a long way in promoting the podcast, as well as rating it on Spotify. I think you can rate it on Spotify and iTunes as well. Or leaving a comment on either of those goes a long way in promoting the podcast and helping me get it out to more people. If you have any injuries, or if you're struggling with something for a long time, and you're trying to get over it, just send me a message. I'd love to jump on a call with you to chat through it, see what it is I could do for you, and if it's something that you need help with, I could lay out a bit of a plan, and if not, at least you'll go away having a better understanding of what to do yourself. So some of the things that I'm working with at the moment would be like tendinopathies and knee tendinopathy, Achilles, hamstring tendinopathies, rotator cuff injuries, dislocations, everything really, hamstring injuries, knee injuries, everything you could think of, back injuries. So if you are interested in that, or if you are struggling with something and it's affecting your performance and you're looking to get back playing, no matter what sport you're in, just reach out to me and I will do my best to help you out. But that's all for me today, guys. Hope everyone is doing well, and yeah, have a good one.